Hello, my name is Mike Power. I am doing this video for Education 4623, Social Media, and 21st Century Learning. For this video, I've decided to talk about something that I was reading about uh, recently and something that I found interesting, and that's the Battle of Signal Hill in 1762. It was one of the final engagements of the Seven Years' War, and it was the final battle in North America. It saw the French capture of St. John's in the spring of 1762 and the British recapture of the city in September of that year. And we'll just quickly take a look at how it all went down. So, this is a British flag from the 1760s, and this would have been one of the many French flags that they flew at that time. This was before the famous tricolor that came about during the French Revolution. So, the tale of the tape. The two leaders in this skirmish or battle were, on the left, William Amherst. He was British. He is the person that Fort Amherst is named after, the fort that was located in the Narrows here in St. John's. And he was leading 200 British soldiers. And on the other side, his opponent, the man who had been tasked with capturing British possessions and territories at the tail end of the 7 Years' War, was this gentleman, Charles Henri Louis d'Arsac de Tarnay. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's definitely fun to say. He was leading 700 French soldiers, and he was successful in capturing St. John's, even if it was only for a few months. So this is a map that they would have been looking at back in the 1760s. It's not from that decade, but it is from that century. So this is a contemporary map they would have been looking at. You can see, the Bay of Placentia, Bay of Fortune, Trinity Bay, Conception Bay, St. John's, Belle Island, a lot of the familiar landmarks. And something to note about British military defense of Newfoundland was they focused entirely on naval power and basically believed that the person who controls the sea controls everything, because it was seen as futile to build up land defenses for multiple reasons. One of them was that the island was seen as just a place for migratory fishing, so there wasn't a lot of permanent residents. It was pretty much abandoned for large parts of the year, and also there's so many harbors and bays and locations around Newfoundland that it would have been impossible to protect them all by land. So that's why naval power was the most important form of defense. So we'll switch over to a contemporary map here. It's just a bit easier to look at and recognize, and hopefully won't give you a headache. But for the purposes of this story, we'll look at the earliest French fortifications on the island, and that was at Placentia. So they set up shop here around the 17th century, and this was basically the seat of their military power in the area. They had their own fishing industry to protect, and on the other side of the Avalon Peninsula, the British were in St. John's. They saw St. John's Harbor as a natural location to project their naval power. The harbor is so easily defended by the Narrows that it was a great spot for them to set up shop. And so the 7 Years' War was, a lot of people refer to it as the First World War because there were so many different theaters across different continents and territories. For the purposes of our story, we're just looking at this one battle, and it happened towards the end of the war. The French had been asked to take British possessions in the area. And so, in Bay Bulls, this location here, about 700 French regulars landed, and they planned to attack St. John's and basically push the British out of their seat of power. They were successful, and in the spring of 1762, they captured St. John's, and they fortified it quite a bit, put a lot of artillery up on Signal Hill. They really dug in. However, 3 months later, in September of that year, the British, led by Amherst, landed in Torbay. Shout out Torbay. And they were able to march on St. John's, take the French by surprise, capture Signal Hill, and push the French out and take them prisoner. So, in a very short matter of time, too. So they were outnumbered, but they had the element of surprise, and Amherst really demonstrated how there is a futility in the heavily fortified locations in Newfoundland because people can sail to another harbor and sort of sneak up on you. And that's exactly what happened. So shortly after this battle, the war at large ended, and there was treaty signed in Europe. And what they decided to do with Newfoundland over in Europe was to have the French move to the small islands of St. Pierre and Miquelon, where they could continue fishing, and the British would maintain control of the rest of Newfoundland. And that basically set up Newfoundland for the next couple of centuries, where it was a British colony. And that's the end of my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.